In today's video, we are going to create a Reddit bot that can respond to requests and give you back some history about any user's comments. So the idea here is you're going to be able to say a username and then as many words as you want, or maybe up to 5 words after that. And it will search their comment history and see how many times they've used that word. It could be something funny like a curse word, Trump, whatever it was. So we're gonna go ahead and sign up for a brand new account. I'm doing that for a couple reasons. While you're testing these bots, you probably don't wanna be utilizing your main account. If for some reason you would accidentally share a password or you would get banned because you're breaking some botting rules, you want to make sure it's at least on a burner account, at least in the beginning. So I would suggest that you go through this process with me. Let's see if Replit bot exists. Oh my goodness, it does. Replit's going to have to buy that from me after this. Let's call this password tutorial 1 exclamation point. Saying my password during the video. That's extremely secure. Bam. Traffic lights, bam, bam, done. All right, we killed it. So we got a Reddit account, so we're good there. Now we're gonna go to reddit.com/prefs with an S and app. Then we're gonna actually go to reddit.com/prefs with an S and apps with an S. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to create a API secret and an ID. So we can call this whatever we want. We can call it word count. This is very important. Change it to be a script. And we can say this is a word count bot. And we can do https://localhost:8080. You don't really have to give a port, I don't think. I don't know why I always do that. And we can create our app. So these fields have to be filled out. The ones that I have filled out here doesn't necessarily have to be the same. We're not going to use a redirect URI, so that doesn't really matter. But it needs to be filled out. So once you get this, we have our client ID, our client secret. And if you remember your username and password, we have that as well for our Reddit account. So now we can go ahead and head over to Replit. Now I'm utilizing Replit for a couple reasons. They have free hosting for our bots, although they do fall asleep if you don't have a paid account. But this gives us the ability to test our bot and feel it out before we look into paid hosting. And it kind of gives us all the same playing field when we start out. So I'm going to head over to replit.com. Now either log in or create your account. And I'm going to go ahead and hit create. I'm going to select Python here and I'm going to name it word counter bot. You can name yours whatever you would like. And I'm going to set it to public. Now down in the description, I'm sure I will have updated links of the updated code of this bot and all that kind of stuff. But I strongly suggest if you want to learn programming, that you follow along with me throughout this exercise, and I'll actually show you how we create it from scratch. It'll really help with the learning process. Now we're going to use a couple different libraries here to accomplish this task. The first one we're going to use is pra. So what this is going to allow us to do is to easily connect to the Reddit API. We're going to import OS. And then we're going to actually use another library to search Reddit comments. This doesn't have to be done. It could be done through the pra API, but this PSAW library, it's going to allow us to search more than 1,000 comments. So we can actually look deeper into someone's comment history. Now, another thing we're going to use is we're going to use Replit's built-in database function. So from Replit, import DB. What this is going to allow us to do is to have some persistence when our app shuts off. So if we shut down the app and start it back up, we can remember things from the previous run. What we're going to utilize this to do is to make sure that we don't comment on the same post twice. So if someone calls our bot and we reply and then shut down the app, we don't want it to reply again when it wakes up. Now I'm going to do some quality of life things here. I'm going to change my settings to have Large font. Maybe I should do huge font. We'll start with that. We'll see how this goes. So here's the libraries that we're going to utilize. We might have a couple more down the road, but we'll stick with this for right now. And now we can kind of test and see if we can connect to the Reddit API. So what we have to do first is we have to create some secrets. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put our username, our password, our client ID, and our client secret inside the secrets tab. This is very important. We don't want to hard code it here. If you remember, we created a public REPL. So someone could fork that and steal all of our information. To prevent that, we're going to use these fields here. So the first thing we're going to use is a client ID. This is your client ID right here. So we can copy that, paste it in the value field. And you can call it whatever you want, but we're going to stay consistent here and we will call it client ID. Then we're going to grab this next little value down here. This is your client secret. We're going to name it the same. So we're going to do client underscore secret. And then paste in our value from before and add this secret as well. We are also going to use a username. And that is whatever your Reddit username is that you're trying to set up. And we did a Replit bot. And now, although I'm saying my username and password out loud, note that these accounts will be disabled or have different passwords. So you cannot use my values here. You have to go through the sign up process yourself. And then password. I did tutorial1 exclamation point. Perfect. So now we have all of our values hidden nicely in the secrets tab over here that we can then utilize in our program. Now you can see some little cheater code here that they give you to import your secrets. So you'll see we did import OS, which I already took care of up here. And then we can grab our secret like this. You can see my secret equals OS, and then it's going to give you some code here. So you see it has client ID here. Let's just see what that looks like if we push insert. So if we push insert here, you'll see that it pulls in our client ID into the program, and now it's stored in the variable called my secret. We don't want that. We will call it client ID, but the idea or the thought is really close to what we want. Let's go ahead and do this for our other values as well. So remember we had 4 values, client secret, and we will call this client underscore secret. We had a username, which we called username. It's worth noting that these don't have to be the same, but it makes sense to me to name them the same. You do have to be consistent with whatever you named them, but they don't have to be the same. And now we have everything we need to connect to the Reddit API. And now let's do that. So let's create a new variable. We can call it Reddit. And we can set it equal to pra.reddit parentheses, and then we'll fill in some values in here. Now you'll see why I named things the way I did. So we're going to say the client underscore ID equals client underscore ID. So what I did here is I matched up the values with what the pra library calls them. So you'll notice this value on the left-hand side is not up to you. That's what the pra API calls it. So you have to use client ID here. Now, if you named it taco salad up here, you could change the value on the right to taco salad, although that would be a little confusing. Here we'll do the same thing. Username equals username, and password equals password. These values all have to be separated by commas as well. As you can see, Reddit does a nice job, Replit does a good job of highlighting our errors with the red line like you would see in a typical code editor. Now we have to have one more here that I didn't put in our secrets because it's not really secret. So you have to pass a user agent as well. And I'm just going to hard code that in. So what they want that to look like is your app name, and then the version. I'm not too strict about this. As long as I throw something in there, it usually doesn't freak out. So now we have everything we need to connect to the API. And now we can set up a Reddit stream. So what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to stream in comments or messages that are directed at our bot into our program. So what we're doing here is we're going to call reddit.inbox.stream, and we're going to name each item we grab out of here. I use item because it could be a comment, it could be a message from a direct message or whatever it is. So it's just some sort of an item to us. And then I'm also going to say skip_existing equals false. So what that's saying is, hey, if the Reddit bot was shut down and someone sent me a message while it was shut down, go ahead and still pull that message into our stream and do something with it. We're going to remember what we had posted with the database, so we don't have to worry about commenting twice, so we can pull in those older items. And now I'm going to print out some values just for our testing. Let's do item.subject. And let's do item.body. And now let's go ahead and run this. Now, the cool part about Replit is it's going to use our imports and try to do the install for us and then run our program. Normally in a IDE or a virtual environment or whatever, you're going to have to pip install your libraries. Now you can see I can't spell existing. So that was a mistake on my part. We'll try and run again. And you'll notice we get no errors, but also nothing happened. We didn't get anything back because we didn't actually call our bot. So let's head back to our Reddit tab here and let's go ahead and log out of our main account that we're creating the bot on. And I want you to log into any other Reddit account you have, and we'll start sending it requests and see if our bot responds. I had another bot I created called Count Words that was essentially testing the same thing. So I'm going to log into that account, and then I'm going to go to reddit.com/r/test. Now what this subreddit is, it's just an area where you can do anything without fear of getting banned or blocked or anything like that. So here we can go and do comments, and you can do this on any post. And let's summon our bot. Remember, it's still running. You see how it says stop here? That means it's already running. So make sure yours is still running. And what we're hoping for is if we summon our bot, it's going to print out the subject and the body here. We can even print a blank line in between. Remember, anytime you change your code, you got to start and stop. So we'll go back to the test here, and we're going to summon our bot by doing use / and then your bot's name. So don't use my bot's name, use yours. And then we can write something after that, like test message. And then we'll go ahead and comment. You'll see that our other account sent the message requesting our bot and giving it a little message here. And if you hop back to our program, you'll see that it says username mentioned and then the actual message here. Now this first part is interesting. This is going to give us a way to tell if it was a direct message, like a private DM, or if it was a comment post. You can see that the comment post shows up as username mentioned. So you'll see here, this is kind of our message that we're going to get back. Now what we want to do with this body is we want to break it apart. To call our bot, we want it to start with our bot's name and then the username of the user you want to look up and then some words that you want to count to tell you how many times a user has said a certain word. So this is going to be pretty easy to do. But as we're going through this, I want you to remember that you can check and look up ways to do different things by checking out the docs or any documentation of libraries you're using. So where I'm getting all this information from is this documentation page. So if you want to do something different, you can literally search on here, if I can spell comments correctly, for whatever you want to look up, and you can find out whatever you need to know about whatever particular class you're looking at. So here on the comment, you can see that it has a body, some different attributes here. You can reply and all kinds of different things. So this is where I got all the information from the bot. So now with this being our message that we're going to get back, we want to do something with the message right away and see if we can break it into pieces that our bot can understand. So I'm going to create a variable called data. Now this variable is going to hold our item.body message, but we want to do something with it. We want to split it apart into different segments. So what this is going to give us back is a list broken apart by spaces. So in this case, our list would contain uReplit bot for our first case, then test, and then message on the second index. So 0, 1, 2 for our indexes. Now you can also pass in an optional parameter of what to split it up on so it doesn't use spaces, but in our case, we want to use spaces. Now, one other thing that we want to do to this string first, so I'm going to put in a dot replace in front of this as well. I want to replace any /_ with a plain underscore. Now, I just got this from testing, but when you reference a username, it actually throws an escape character in front of it. And then when we search for that user, it doesn't find them. Now, the first thing we want to do is if item.subject equals, and then let's just copy this phrase into our if statement. So if, oops, I killed our program. Let's copy that. So if our subject is username mentioned, we want to pop off the first element. So why are we doing that? Well, we don't want to search for Replit bot. We want to search for whoever our user is interested in searching for. So they're actually going to give us call it with Replit bot, and then the next element is going to be the username they want to search. So after we do that, let's print out data. Okay. So let's cut out some of these print statements just to clean it up. So the only thing that should print out is our data. So let's run this again. And now we can go back to tests. So when we search, we're actually going to want someone else's username to see what they've commented. So in my case, I'm going to use jcat49er just because it's right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call uReplit bot. I'm going to say jcat49er, and then I'm going to say any words I want it to search for. So he posted are funny, so let's just see how many times he said funny. Now our bot doesn't work yet, so we're just going to see how this looks and how it prints out. jcat funny, cool. And now you'll see when this ran, it spit out jcat49er and then funny. You'll also notice that when I stopped and restarted it, it ran the first test message through as well, which doesn't look like the right format. But this brings up a good point. What if someone searches for a user that doesn't exist? We'll have to handle that use case as we go through our process. Let's put another check in here. So we know that we want the length of our data to be at least 2, right? They have to have one, the 0 index is going to be the username, and the 1 index is going to be a word that they're searching for. But we also want to allow them to search for multiple words. So we're going to say that our data length has to be at least 2 elements, the username and the first word, and the length of our data element has to be less than or equal than 6 data elements. Now this is just so they don't end up exploding our program by trying to search for 80 words. We're going to say that the name we're searching for is equal to the 0 index of our data packet. So the 0 index is going to be this first index, in this case, jcat49er. Now we're going to create our first function in our program. Now this is going to help us make sure the user exists. So let's say if user underscore exists, and then we're going to pass in the username. So if that does exist, let's print out an F string. So we're running the name of the user, and we're searching for words, and we're going to slice the rest of it. So we're going to start at position 1, and we're going to go clear to the end of the index. So what this would do is if we had multiple words, it would print out all the words after the first index. So it would say running for JCat 49er, words, funny, and then as many other words as they had chosen. And don't forget your closing quote mark here. Else, let's print user doesn't exist. Awesome. Now you'll see this is red. Why? Because we haven't created this function. So let's go up here and let's actually create our user exist functions. So let's say define user exists. We're going to pass in a name. In here we're going to do something kind of cheeky. We're going to do a try catch block, and we're going to say reddit.redditor name.id. So what this is going to do is it's essentially going to search for a Redditor by the name that we pass it and then try to grab its ID attribute. Now, if this doesn't exist, it's actually going to throw an error. It's going to throw a not found error. And if that happens, we want to return false, because if it's not found, then the username doesn't exist. Otherwise, we want to return true. We don't really care about the ID. We just want to know if the user exists or not. In order to use this error catch here, let's add in from procore.exceptions import not found. Perfect. Again, you can get this from the documentation. So now we should be able to tell if a user exists or not. Now we should be able to stop and run this again, and it should pull in our messages. Remember, we're not handling the duplicate message errors yet. So you can see it did find a user for test, because that probably exists. And then it did find a user for JCat 49er. Let's try to do a bogus user. So let's say replit bot. I'm just going to add a bunch of characters. And then we will test Mayo and Cubs. So now this user probably doesn't exist, although with Reddit you never know. So hopefully it says user doesn't exist or whatever we printed out down here. So you'll see in this case the user doesn't exist. But the most important thing, it doesn't bomb out our program when someone enters a username that doesn't exist. Now we might want to respond back with a better comment than user doesn't exist to the command console, but we'll get to that in a minute. So now we know the username does exist. So let's count some words for them. So let's create a new helper function, and this is going to be called count word. And we're going to pass in the name of the user and the data we're trying to count. Now remember, it might be more than one word. In this case, it was 2 words, Mayo and Cubs. In this case, it was only 1 word. So we're using slicing again. So we're saying data starting at the 1 index, which would be this index, and then going as many words as they want to pass in, although we know it has to be less than 5 because of our if statement up here. So that looks good, and then we'll return some info from this function. So we had to create another function, and this is kind of going to be the brains of our program. So we're going to call it def count underscore words. We can pass in name. And just for the record here, this doesn't have to be the same as what we named it down below. So we could say user, for example, here. So we can pass in user, our word list. That's what we're going to use to search. And let's add another parameter here called limit. Now let's default the limit to 5,000 messages. This is how many it's going to search. Because it's a parameter that has a default set for it, that means you don't have to set it when you call the function. So we're not going to, and we're just going to use the limit of 5,000. So we're going to say gen equals api.search underscore comments. We want to search by author. And the author in this case is going to be whatever user they passed in. And the limit is going to be limit. So that's how many messages we want to search. Now let's create an info dictionary that we'll pass back at the end of this. So we want to pass back the total comments that they've sent, which will start at 0, and then the counts of those comments. This is a little tricky here, so I'm going to pass in a list with a 0, and I'm going to times that by the length of their word list. Now, that's a little kind of weird to look at first, but essentially what's going to happen is for every word that they pass in, it's going to add another 0 to the list with this equation here. So if they pass in 3 words, they're going to end up with something like this, and then we can return the counts of the words like 10, 50, and 5 maybe in a little list like that we can grab back out. Now this created a generator above. So what we're going to do is now we're going to iterate over that. So we're going to say for comment in gen, and then for I, comma, word in enumerate word underscore list. So what this is going to do, it's going to iterate over the last 5,000 comments that this user has posted, and then it's going to check for each word in our word list. So if they have 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, it's going to check each one of those inside of this for loop. So we're going to say if word.lower is in comment.body.lower. So what I'm doing here is I'm lowercasing their entire comment, and I'm lowercasing our words. So case will not matter. And then if there is a match, so if there is a match, if that word is in their comment somewhere, let's do plus or equals 1. Now, this isn't totally accurate yet, right? Because they might say the word 2 or 3 times in their comment. But for right now, we're saying they can say the word once in one comment. So it's like how many comments have had that word in it. And then we also need to increase the total comment count. Because even though we're searching up to 5,000 comments, some people might not have 5,000 comments to begin with. And then let's return our info dictionary. So I know this is pretty crazy, but we're already getting some information back here. So let's go ahead and test that. So down here, we grabbed our info. We do have count word, although it's underlined, so it still says that function doesn't exist. I called it count word there and count words up here. So you'll notice the spelling is different. So I got to fix one of those. I'm just going to change this to count words. And then after that, let's just print out info. Now we're testing this in a pretty peculiar way here. We're just adding a lot of print statements. That's not necessarily the best way to do things, but that's the way we're going to do it. So we're going to search for these users. So the first one, if I rerun this, it's probably going to search the user test to see how many times they've said the word message. And then JCat49er, see how many times they said funny. And then this one will error out, so it won't run at all. So let's go ahead and run this. Now I forgot a crucial step. We use this API.search comments, but I did not initialize the API. I just imported it above. So let's actually initialize that and try and run again. Okay, so we're not totally sure here, but we know that it ran on test user for how many times they said the word message, and you'll see total comments are 0 and counts are 0. So we might be able to verify that if we go to reddit.com/u/test. This is the user named test, and you can see they haven't posted anything, and if we go to comments, they haven't commented anything, so that checks out. Now you'll see that it also ran on JCat49er for how many times they've said funny, and that count came back as 12. So it appears to work, and then the last one says user doesn't exist. And you'll notice each time this is still trying the same 3 messages every time, even though we've actually answered those each time. So before we start commenting on things, we might want to make sure we haven't already commented on something. We can do that pretty easily using Replic's database. So in order to comment on something, we want to make sure that the data has the right amount, and we want to make sure the user exists. So I'm actually going to put this inside of this if statement here. So I'm going to highlight all of it and then hit tab. So now we're all inside this if statement. I also want to make sure that we haven't already commented. So let's say and we have not already underscore commented on this item.id. So we're going to create another function to make sure we haven't already commented on something. And that's going to be really easy. So you can add this function wherever. I'll put it up at the top. Let's say def already underscore commented. We're going to pass in a comment ID. And we're going to say if our comment underscore ID is in db.keys, return true. Otherwise, we're going to return false. Now, you can read more about Replic's API for their database, and you can see some of the functions down here if you click on this little database key. But essentially, we're going to add items to the database, and this function is going to check to see if that comment is already in the database. Now, obviously, we're checking the database, but we're not storing the items we've replied to yet. So once we have this info, instead of printing this out, we might want to send the user a reply message. So I'm going to say our reply message equals an F string. And I'm going to post whatever name they sent, and then from info, I'm going to pull out total underscore comments. So this is going to say the user has sent 5,000 messages. Here are the word counts. Now I'm going to put this on the same line. Should wrap around. There we go. I'm just doing this because I have such a large font right now. Well, that looks a little better. So this is going to be our reply message. And now we need to append on the counts of each word. So we'll say for index word in enumerate data, we're going to use our little slice trick again from one index all the way to the end. And each time we're going to add to our reply message. So you'll notice we're appending to this. So it's going to keep the message that we type above. And then we're going to append the word. And then we're going to append info counts. Ooh, and we have to give the index of the count. So remember, it was a list of all the counts. And then we have to grab out each individual count. And then let's do /n, which is going to give us a line break at the end here. Then if we send the message, we want to add that item to our database. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the ID of the message a key, and then we're going to make the value the name. Now, we're not using the value right now, so it doesn't really matter, but oh, and I said this was replay message. We actually want reply message. Okay, that's better. So now we're not going to send anything, right? We're going to add each database item to our database now. So the first time I run this, it should do everything from before. It should query those individuals again, and you'll see that it's running it for the test words and it's running it for JCat 49er. You can ignore, this has some warning messages for different things, and you'll notice I didn't print out info again here. Now let's try and stop and run this again after we added our values to the database. And you'll see this time it doesn't run for those messages. So it's like it commented on them. Now we haven't actually commented on them yet, but this is going to allow it to not post to the same thing twice. But now, most importantly, we have to comment back to our original message. So let's say send underscore message. Let's send the item so we can work with that. That's whatever message we're using, and I'll show you why in a minute. And then we're also going to pass it the message that we want to send. Now again, send message doesn't exist, so let's roll up here and create it. Def send underscore message. We're going to pass it an item and a reply underscore message. Now in this one, we have to do a try except block as well. PRA has a built-in rate limit. You can turn it off, but it keeps you from getting banned. So we are going to try to reply to the item. Now this is going to reply to a direct message or a comment, and we want the body to equal whatever was in our reply message variable. Then let's go ahead and mark the item as read. And this will return true. So if we return true from send message, then we can assume that we actually did send the message. Now let's catch an exception here. Now the exception that we're going to be catching is going to be a rate limit exception. We'll print out E just for your debugging purposes, and we can return true. False, rather, because it didn't send if this exception hits. So we're going to try and reply to the message, and we're going to accept an error if we've commented too much. That will prevent our bot from getting banned. So let's run this again. Let's go back to the test subreddit. Let's just pick another user, minimum hippo here. And we don't have to reply to them. We could do it somewhere else, but let's reply to this just as a test. So we're going to do u/replit bot. Let's count how many times they've said no, because we know that they at least did it once. And then let's also search for poop and clarity. We'll reply. Oh no, and we did it wrong. I did it wrong. I like this we when we're not successful. It's going to search the user no for the words poop and clarity. Yep, and that user doesn't exist. Okay, so let's try this again. We're going to do u/replit bot minimum hippo. Let's do no poop and clarity. No poop clarity. So we do know this user exists, or at least existed at that time. So hopefully this will give us back a count for that user. And now if you look at my post here, you'll see that our replit bot did respond. And it says minimum hippo sent 3 messages. Here are the word counts. No. So it didn't give all the messages here. We wanted it to also search for poop and clarity. Ooh, you'll notice why. So in this for loop, if you slide down to the for loop, you'll notice we send the message before we finish checking all the words. So let's take that out of the for loop. And now, so it said that same message. It said we were sending messages too often. I wondered how that happened. But we were trying to send a message for each individual word instead of sending it for the entire search. So let's wait a little bit and we'll try and run this again. While we're waiting, we can actually add one more check in here. Let's not add it to our database unless the message is successfully sent. How do you spell successful? It's really late here. So if successful, remember our send messages returns true or false. So we'll just say if successful, then we'll post it. So if we hit a rate limit or something like that, this is going to be false, and then we will try later to send the message again. Let's reply to the happy numbers bot. So let's say use /replit bot. Let's say happy number bot. We want to count how many times they've said stats or test or count or number. Now let's reply. And you'll see it's running on the happy number bot. That's good. It's doing some searches. Don't mind the warnings. That's part of one of the search libraries that we're using. And we totally forgot that we might want to output something so we know it did send the message. So maybe next time we run it, we'll print out to the console, message sent. To name. But let's go back to our test and see if we got a reply to this message. And you'll see here that if we go to the profile, remember this is on another account, you'll see that my Replit bot did respond. It said happy number bot sent 5,000 messages. So remember our limit of search was 5,000. You could increase or decrease that if you wanted. Here are the word counts. So 4,986 messages contained number, which makes sense. Count was in 8, test was in 6, and stats was in just that one that we referenced. Let's take a click on happy number bot rather. And you'll see that their messages do contain the word number. So I'm assuming that's why we're getting 3,900 whatever. Now I beefed up this Replit for you guys. So if you look down below, you can fork my updated project with all the bugs removed in any updated code since the release of this video. Fork that project. Leave me a comment on this video and on that Replit. Let me know what other videos you want to watch. If you haven't subscribed to the Replit channel, subscribe to them because they let me have cool videos on here. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, check out Clarity Coders on YouTube for even more bots, video game hacks, all kinds of cool things we do with Python and programming in general. And until next time, keep coding.